Grind garlic. I didn't think this tiny step mattered until I saw how my 97-year-old grandma uses it to support her body's natural balance. She's still active, still steady, and she's kept this habit for years. With Muffin, her little corgi, always nearby. When people ask how she stays this way, she just smiles and points to garlic. But how should it be ground? And how does she use it every day to make the most of it? When her body feels heavy, puffy, or run down, she adds onion powder too. Why? Let's find out in today's video. And before we begin with the first step, grinding garlic, may God bless you and your family with health, peace, and strength. As we get older, the body doesn't always feel as light and resilient as it once did. Energy dips more easily, small discomforts linger longer. That's why my grandma believes simple daily kitchen habits matter. And for her, it starts with garlic. So the first step is simple, yet very important. My grandma once told me she learned how to choose garlic from my grandpa many years ago. He always looked for bulbs that were fresh, firm, dry on the outside, and free from soft spots or unusual smells. He said good garlic gives a gentler aroma, a more balanced taste, and is easier to use every day. Grandma said when she was younger, she used to pick quickly, but Grandpa would gently remind her, small things done carefully make bigger things easier later. And she shared a Bible verse he often told her. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much. She says that applies not only to life, but even in this kitchen. If the garlic is old, damp, or soft, the natural aroma fades, the taste can become harsher, and it doesn't dry as evenly. We move to the next step. Peel the garlic. This step is simple too, but Grandma always does it gently and with care. She presses each clove lightly with the flat side of a knife, letting the skin slip off on its own. She says this keeps the clove intact and dry, which helps it dry more evenly later. If the garlic is crushed too hard or handled roughly, moisture comes out and it doesn't dry as well. So she always reminds me to slow down here, and the next steps will be easier. Once the garlic is peeled and kept dry, she moves on to the next step. Finally, chopping the garlic. She always chops the garlic very finely and evenly. She says the smaller the pieces, the faster and more evenly they dry. If the pieces are uneven, the larger ones stay moist, while the smaller ones dry too quickly, making the next steps less consistent. At this point, she usually smiles and says that when she was younger, she once chopped garlic unevenly, and my grandpa gently teased her. If you cut like that, some will dry, and some will stay wet. How can it turn out right? She says that's when she learned to be more patient with each cut. So now she works slowly, keeping each piece even, so everything that follows becomes easier. Once the garlic is chopped evenly, she spreads it gently on parchment paper and moves to the drying step. She often says that in the old days, garlic was dried under the sun, and that took real patience. You had to watch the sky, bring everything in if clouds rolled over, and move fast if the air started to feel damp. Now, to make things easier and more consistent, I use an air fryer instead. I keep the temperature low, around 194 degrees Fahrenheit, about 90 degrees Celsius, and let the garlic dry for about 60 to 90 minutes. Every 20 to 30 minutes, I open it and gently shake or stir the pieces so they dry evenly. She says the secret is gentle heat and full dryness. If garlic is stored with even a little moisture, it can clump and spoil faster. But when it's dried slowly and completely, the aroma stays mild, the texture stays light, and the powder later blends smoothly into everyday meals. And once the garlic is fully dried, light, and crisp, she moves on to the next step, grinding. She always says this is where patience turns into something useful. She pours the dried garlic into the blender and uses short bursts. She smiles and says that years ago, she used a mortar and pestle to crush garlic by hand. She says it took longer, but the kitchen felt quieter, and you could really smell the garlic slowly releasing its aroma. She laughs, remembering how her hands would get tired, and my grandpa would peek in and say, "Want me to take a turn? Or are you getting your arm workout in today?" When ground gently, the garlic turns into a soft, fine powder with a warm, mild scent. Once the garlic has turned into powder, she takes one more gentle step to make it smoother. She pours the ground garlic into a fine sieve and gently shakes it over a bowl. The soft, fine powder falls through, while the larger pieces stay on top. She says this step reminds her to slow down and not rush small things. When everything is sifted, the powder feels lighter, smoother, and easier to use in everyday cooking. If some pieces are still too big, she sets them aside and dries them a little longer before grinding again. When everything is sifted, the powder feels lighter, smoother, and easier to use in everyday cooking. As for the larger garlic pieces left in the sieve, she never throws them away. She spreads them back onto parchment paper and lets them dry a few more minutes, so no moisture stays inside. She says even a little dampness can make the powder clump and spoil faster. Once they're fully dry, she grinds them again until everything becomes the same soft, fine powder. Before storing the powder, she always prepares the jar carefully. She places the glass jar into a pot of boiling water and lets it sit there for about 5 minutes. She says the heat helps remove bacteria and anything we can't see. And it also warms the glass so it stays dry longer after cooling. Then she takes it out and lets it air dry completely. She never rushes this step. She says if the jar still holds moisture, the powder may lose its texture and freshness sooner. But when everything is clean and fully dry, the garlic powder stays smooth. Just a small pinch added into warm meals each day, eggs in the morning, or soup and vegetables later on. She says small, steady amounts work better than using too much all at once. Garlic has natural sulfur compounds that are part of the body's normal way of handling everyday stress. That's why she prefers adding it into meals, instead of taking a large amount at one time. Over time, she believes this simple habit helps the body feel more steady and less overwhelmed. But she says garlic isn't the whole story. There are times when the body feels heavier than usual. A little puffy, slower, not quite itself. She remembers a week when my grandpa felt that way, and meals just needed to feel lighter and easier. That's when she shifted in the kitchen and started adding more onion, fresh and ground, into soups and warm dishes. She says onion feels different in the body, and sometimes that's what the moment calls for. That's how the second habit became part of her routine. She always reminds me onion behaves differently than garlic. Onions naturally hold more moisture, so they need thinner slices and slower drying. Next, she slices the onion thin. She says thin slices dry more evenly and help the powder stay smooth. So I keep slicing slowly, making each piece about the same thickness. Not too thick, not paper thin, just even enough so they dry at the same pace. After that, I spread the slices out on a plate first, just to separate them so they don't stick together. Then I get the drying tray ready. I lay a sheet of parchment paper across the bottom, smoothing it flat with my hands. Once everything is set, I gently place the onion slices on top of the paper, spreading them out in a single layer so the air can move around each piece. Because onions contain more natural water than garlic, she dries them slowly and gently. She waits until the slices turn light, crisp, and break easily. Dried onion tastes softer and slightly sweet. That's why she uses it when meals need to feel lighter and easier on the body. It melts into soups and broths smoothly without standing out. The garlic is done roasting. Now I'll let it cool before grinding. It smells so amazing. You can really feel how gentle, slow roasting brings out its natural flavor. The smell of roasting onions is so comforting. It makes me feel calm and grounded. Fills the kitchen with that cozy, homey feeling. I'll let the onions cool down a bit before the next step. Once they're no longer warm, I'll transfer them into the blender and grind them just like the garlic. This onion powder is so versatile. I can use it in soups, eggs, vegetables, or any simple meal that needs a gentle, savory touch. Then she sifts the powder to keep only the finest part. By the way, I'm wishing you good health and peaceful days ahead. And I'd really love to know, which country are you watching this video from? She doesn't use onion powder the same way as garlic. Garlic is stronger and warming. Onion is gentler and more background. She adds onion powder when the body feels heavy or puffy, or when appetite feels low. A little in broth, soups, scrambled eggs, or simple vegetables. Just small, steady amounts. She says onions are known for plant compounds like quercetin and natural sulfur elements, often talked about for supporting the body's normal balance. For the larger granules that are left over after sifting, I don't throw them away at all. I like to store them in a small jar separately. They're actually very handy in the kitchen. These slightly coarser bits have more texture, so they're perfect for dishes where I want a little more body and flavor. I often sprinkle them into soups while they're simmering, so they slowly soften and release their aroma. They're also great in stews, roasted vegetables, or when sautéing mushrooms and greens. Thank you so much for spending this time with me in the kitchen. If this was helpful, I've placed more of my grandma's simple kitchen habits in the playlist right here. All easy, practical, and made for everyday life. Wishing you and your family health, peace, and many warm, comforting meals. I'll see you in the next video.